Hello, everybody. My name is Wesley Hales, and I present to you my tour from print to digital historical deja vu. Now, why did I choose this topic in particular? Well, I chose this topic because it is of deep interest to me. I have written a paper that was very similar to this project in my undergraduate years, as well as a couple of my undergraduate cohort members. And while a lot of our papers focused almost entirely upon the Middle Ages and the preservation of manuscript in regards to print, I would like to expand that project by drawing a further connection to our modern digital age. Now, here's the project overview. The lens of this project will, for the most part, be shining a spotlight upon some of the similarities of reception for new methods of writing. But one important question that you should keep in your mind as we go through this tour is, does history repeat or does it rhyme? Because as we'll take a look at some of the reception of the new formats of writing, you'll see that a lot of these similar arguments stay the same for 500 plus years. Now, here's objective one. Our first objective for this project is to outline the response of the public upon the advent of the printing press. And we'll take a look at a couple of arguments against the printing press and some efforts made in regards to the preservation of manuscript. And once that's been done, we will be taking a look at some similar arguments within our time in regards to print and digital writing. Because as we are living this right now, we are in an information revolution, and I feel that we will be shocked at some of the comparisons that we'll be able to make between these two entirely different eras. Here's a couple of my VIPs, number one being Paul Dover. He was my instructor at KSU in my Information Ages senior research seminar. And he wrote a book that was pivotal in my writing of my paper for that seminar. And we have Katie Kojali, who is a classmate of mine who was in that same seminar, who's gone on to have some of her works in regards to this topic published by KSU under Paul Dover. Here's two of my honorable mentions. Krista A. Milne, who is a person that I found on Twitter. She is an assistant professor at Leiden University over in the Netherlands, and her page was really cool because she is basically living my dream, and she has done a lot of work upon medieval literacy, which is the exact paper that I was writing in undergraduate. And another one is Michael Rundle, who wrote one of the most interesting articles that I found for this project. I had a little bit of issue finding some correlation between modern times and print and digital, but his article was amazing. He wrote Macmillan Dictionary, The End of Print, and his tone throughout that article encapsulates perfectly the fear of people that are considering digitization as the great usurper. His article reads like a silent cry in the night for a time long past. Now, we have some other important works. I will go through these kind of quickly. One is The End of Print, which we just talked about, written by Rundell. Another one is From Print to Digital. This article takes an in-depth look at the tidal wave of digital content that's being delivered to students and school children, and whether or not this transition to a digital medium is either aiding or working against the children's education. Now, in the split, we have some text talking about the medieval ages with the manuscripts and the printing press. One is The Survival of Manuscripts. This is written by Katie Kojali, and she focuses upon primary sources of the Middle Ages that pushed back against Gutenberg's printing press and were in favor of manuscript writing, as well as other efforts undertaken to preserve manuscript writing as a whole. And The Information Revolution in Early Modern Europe, written by Paul Dover, goes into minute detail of the changes seen in in European society during the advent of the printing press. Now, here is a interesting point that I would like to get started with, which is an argument against writing. Now, who do you think is a very important historical figure that we all consider very highly whenever we talk about philosophy or history? I bet you might not be able to guess who would say something in opposement to writing. That would be our buddy Socrates. He says, "Well, then, those who think that they can leave written instructions for an art, as well as those who accept them, thinking that writing can yield results that are clear or certain, must be quite naive and truly ignorant of Thamos' prophetic judgment. Otherwise, how could they possibly think that the words that have been written down can do more than remind those who already know what the writing is about?" A little bit out of left field. But he has a point, just not in the way that you might think that he does. Now, this is about cataloging knowledge. We have new methods which usher forth new fears. Though it seems that Socrates was off of his rocker with this statement, his argument has a valid basis. He argues that writing as a practice can only serve as a reminder to those who already know what the writing is about. He treasures the days of memorizing stories and practices because, remember, the Iliad and the Odyssey were, before written, they were oral poems. They would have entire festivals dedicated to reading these poems that would be over a course of, a week or so of time. Who knows how long it would take them to get through it. And he feared that writing would encourage poor memory. Now, this is really an issue of cataloging, because at every point in history where we see a new advancement made within the realms of writing, there are always those that feel that there are fundamental flaws with this new practice, and that can be boiled down to how we go about cataloging knowledge. These issues usually only revolve or generally revolve around the central idea of simplification. But there are always going to be preservations of past practices. Throughout history, whenever we see a massive shift within the world of writing, we will thusly find groups springing up entirely upon the basis of preserving those past practices. And as we'll see, one of the best examples of this is seen within manuscript writing upon the advent of the printing press. Now, here are some similar arguments that we see from both the Middle Ages and in our modern day. One of which is this general idea of older is better. Because if we look during the 17th century, we had something occurring throughout Europe and all over that whole area. I mean, you can see that map right there, called the Republic of Letters. That just sounds really interesting just based off the title. This Republic of Letters was between a lot of Enlightenment thinkers. And one effect that the printing press had upon European life was an explosion of handwritten letters. People found a deep-seated love and interest in writing letters and sending them to people in ways that we hadn't seen before, because with the advent of the printing press, literacy rates started to slowly rise, as they had been slowly rising before, but now they had aids, because now we had printed aids to help people read. We called them primers. And a lot of the letters written by these Enlightenment thinkers survive to this day and can be read. Now, here is a modern argument, which is, it's just not the same. One of my articles that I use is written by Kim Jong-boom, and they do an amazing job in their article discussing how people push back against this wave of digitization. And one of the most interesting is what they call a tradition barrier. Kind of a complicated term, but I'm sure that you've heard someone say at some point in time that nothing can beat the page turn of a physical book. Whenever you're talking about audiobooks or ebooks, you're talking and you're like, oh yeah, but you're on an iPad. Nothing feels better than seeing the progress you're making on a book and being able to turn the page, the smell of the book, so on and so forth. That's what we would call a tradition barrier. And another one is new tech, but no substance. At the advent of the printing press, we all know that one of the most important and one of the books that we shine the most light on coming out of the Gutenberg's presses were the Bibles, the famous Gutenberg Bibles that sell for multiple millions of dollars in auctions nowadays. For a while, that remained the case, and a lot of literature that was being produced by these printing presses were religious literature. And for a while, that remained unchanged. In our modern day, we have a similar issue. When ebooks started to become a thing on the internet and people could read books digitally. One thing that publishers and ebook publishers had to cope with at the time was a lack of variety due to the fact that publishers were cautious of how well that the ebook medium would prefer. So, therefore, ebooks had to go through a baptism of fire, so to speak, before they became as popular of a medium as they know today. It was just a really shallow pool that eventually, once it took off, became filled out, and nowadays you could find an ebook of basically any printed book, just about. But this all leads to my central question right now, which is, what can you do in living in this modern age? And that is simply to just sit back and watch the show. Because as I said before, we're living during an information revolution. It is constantly happening all around us as tech industries grow. They create new means to catalog knowledge and change the way our lives are lived. So just step back and realize that what you are living through, because it's truly incredible to be living during such a time as this. Because one last thing that we need to remember is that coexistence always wins. During times of innovation within the world of literature and cataloging knowledge, there is always a struggle for coexistence, as we've seen before. Fortunately, like times past, coexistence always wins. In the Middle Ages, there were massive undertakings to preserve manuscript writing, and today, though we are able to buy all the ebooks that we could possibly want, we are still able to buy physical copies of books, and also, due to the preservation that was undertaken during the Middle Ages to preserve manuscript writing, we are still able to read and physically touch medieval manuscripts today. And as more expansions are made within the realm of digitization, we are able to also view those same manuscripts in digital format. So as these advancements are made in digitization, thusly do our horizons also expand. Here are some of my sources. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to my presentation. Thank you guys so much.